Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. Matthew Coller and Dane Mizutani of the Pioneer Press. We are actually outside of TCO Performance Center because it is a really nice day, except for the air's a little smoky, but it's not 95 degrees with 100% humidity, so the pod moves to the outdoors, and what we're going to do is talk about the biggest developments of the first 7 days of Minnesota Vikings training camp. And I think we have to start with one that we just saw in practice, which is that Christian Darrisaw is back working 11 on 11s, and that is enormous news. And I think it was either the first or second rep he got in there, Dane. He moved a body and they got a big run behind him, and it was like, yeah, that's right. You can't just find a guy like Christian Darrisaw. His recovery seems to be on track, which of all the developments, a lot of them were going to say, hey, well, we'll see where this goes, or it's going to take time. But they really can't have a good offensive line unless they have Christian Darrisaw. So that was big to see him back in practice.
Yeah, and that's a good place to start because everything else felt very training camp-y, and we will get into all of that on the pod. But this was the biggest news of the day, the news item that, yes, Christian Darrisaw, who is coming off of a torn ACL and MCL, and I think some people had worries, is he even going to be ready for week one? Well, it's July 30th, and he is taking reps with the full team, 11 on 11s. We got to see that starting offensive line kind of in action for the first time. He didn't participate in every single rep of 11 on 11. It seemed like they were easing him back into the mix, but yes, no rust for him. I think Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins learned what it was like to go up against him. A rookie who's been having a pretty good camp immediately comes in and gets a rep against one of the best left tackles in the league, gets turned, manhandled, and I think on the very next play, Christian Darrisaw just completely erased Gabe Murphy, who has also been having a pretty good camp. So those guys learned it's different going up against Christian Darrisaw than just in school, and I think the Vikings as a whole are happy with where he's at, certainly with how careful this team plays injuries. He would not be participating in these team drills if he was not deemed fit to do so. So big development for the Vikings, and just kind of something to latch on to here when we really like to dive into a lot of the minutia during camp.
Absolutely. I thought I would get that out of the way, that update first, because, I mean, this is a franchise type of player that we're going to be watching every single step. So if he can get back by week one, that would be huge for JJ McCarthy and the run game and the pass game. But really the biggest theme, though, is that the defense has been ahead of the offense, and that the defense also might just be absolutely disgusting. This is an offensive line that has been without Darrisaw and also without Will Fries for a good portion of it. We've seen Blake Brandel getting in quite a bit, so they haven't been at totally 100%, and Donovan Jackson is a rookie and is just getting into the swing of things here. But the defensive line has been so dominant in these first couple of practices. And we were talking about this earlier today, just about, I mean, this was not an average defense who went out and signed some free agents. This was a great defense overall for the Vikings last year, and they went out and didn't just sign some free agents. They signed two guys who have been stars at defensive tackle, and they have dominated these practices to the point where there have been times where JJ McCarthy has had absolutely no chance to even throw the ball. In the last two padded practices, we have seen periods that included those moments where he took the snap and was immediately, would have been hit, of course, would have been crushed, but immediately the rep just ends because the defense is on top of him so quickly.
Yeah, and there are times in training camp, the way that it functions, where the ones on offense go up against the twos on defense. And I think to myself, like, what are we doing? Like, let's see ones on ones. Let's get this, football thing really going. And then you see parts of practice where it's ones on ones, and you can't get any work done. So I do understand why the starters on offense get some of their work done against the backups on defense, so to speak, because let's just start from the trenches out. The defense has been dominant. Yes, Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave have been everything you would hope they would be through 7 days of training camp, through a week of training camp with no hitting and bringing guys to the ground, down to the ground. But those guys have been forces, and they look healthy. They look ready to really step into that defensive front and make a difference, whether they're moving Ryan Kelly 5 yards backwards right into JJ McCarthy's lap, or turning, Donovan Jackson and welcoming him to the NFL. Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave are going to be huge pieces of this defense if they can stay healthy. And then it just from there, Jonathan Grenard, pretty damn good player. Andrew Van Ginkel looks even better this year. I mean, early in training camp, Dallas Turner, I'm sure we'll get into him more, but maybe the most impressive guy just in terms of growth from where he was last year to where he appears to be this year. The cornerbacks are making plays. You see Byron Murphy Jr., he had a pick 6 today. Jeff Okudah has stepped up and looked pretty good. Harrison Smith and Josh Metellus are playmakers back there. You can see why the defense has garnered the reputation, at least from reporters early in camp, being one, ahead of the offense, and two, potentially having a sky-high, ceiling to them. So I think right now, yes, it is kind of an adage of training camp, the defense is ahead of the offense. It absolutely is. And if you're just a glass half full, it's not that the offense looks bad, it's just that the defense is too freaking good.
Well, let's go on the glass half empty side of that. Now, I do want to circle back to a couple defensive players that are developments, but we'll start with the big picture and we'll work our way down to the micro. JJ McCarthy started out training camp, I thought, extremely well. He looked sharp throwing the football. He had a huge day on Saturday. Was that day 4, where he just was hitting everything down the field, intermediate, touch, layer, all that sort of stuff that we've talked about with him throwing the ball. And then the last couple of practices, as they've added more and more to his plate, and as they've done more one-on-ones, one versus ones with the first team, more situational stuff, that's where it has looked a lot more joggy with the offense, a lot more frustrating reps for McCarthy. And I think what we've seen early on is that defensive line shaking up the starting quarterback a little bit. I didn't think in the first day that he was down on himself or anything else like that, but there were a couple times in the second padded practice where you saw a lot of the offensive players kind of, making some faces or throwing their heads back a little bit. Jordan Addison finally caught a touchdown in a drill and threw the ball up in the air in celebration because they had so much trouble at times moving the football and having success. So what are we to make of JJ McCarthy's training camp so far? How about put it in this way? Like, how would you grade JJ McCarthy's training camp through the first 7 days?
Letter grade, I would say it's a solid B. Like, it's not an A+, because the last 2 days, today, full pads, it was a struggle at times. Even yesterday, not a padded practice, but it was a struggle at times. So I can't sit here and give him an A+, but I don't want to, because these last 2 days have been up and down, totally ignore how good he looked early in training camp, how composed, in and out of the huddle. It doesn't look clunky. The operation functions. Like we've talked about in training camp, sometimes we just look, can they run a practice? Yes, they can. The balls downfield at times have looked good. The layering can be improved. He needs to improve his touch, but you can see he's taken steps forward in that area as well. I don't want to overlook all of that just because there were 2 days where the defense looked like a bunch of demons out there. But at the same time, it would be a little disingenuous to just sit here and say, he's been awesome, he's been great, Super Bowl's coming to Minnesota, because there have been times where I agree, he has looked rattled, he has looked sped up. There was a throw today during a red zone drill where Jalen Naylor's coming across the field streaking wide open, and JJ McCarthy looks like he tried to throw it 100 miles an hour, probably because he was feeling some pressure that maybe wasn't there in that specific rep, and he just missed him completely. That's a throw that early last week or early in training camp he makes, no questions asked. So I think you can see his body clock getting a little sped up. So I can't give him an A, but I don't want to just harp on these struggles as this guy is rattled and won't figure it out, because I do have to give some credit to the defense and just what they're doing out there.
I'm also trying to keep in my head what it was like last year with Sam Darnold, and what time did we actually decide that Sam Darnold looked pretty good. And I think that it wasn't really until after the first preseason game where Darnold started to lock in. We also might want to mention that Justin Jefferson is not practicing. He is the best wide receiver in the National Football League, so that could make a bit of a difference with getting rid of the football, being accurate, seeing it the same way that you would. It's nice to pretend that Lucky Jackson is Justin Jefferson, but the gap is a guy who's never played an NFL game versus the best of the best in the entire league. That has to be impacting McCarthy to some extent. But I think that even some of the decisions with the football have not been ideal. Just give you a couple examples from practice today. One where he rolled out and he was looking down the field, and he could have scrambled, could have taken some yards, and he decides he's just going to go for it. He's going to take a shot to the back of the end zone. Doesn't get quite enough juice on it. Ball comes out a little flat, and it ends up getting picked off by Jay Ward. Actually, great play by Jay Ward to identify where it was headed, but still not an interception you can really throw because they would have been in field goal position, and it's a bad choice. And then later in the practice, similarly, he's scrambling away from the pressure, and this is the issue, right? The pressure is coming fast. Van Ginkel wins immediately, so he's got to kind of scoot out. Could have run for 5 or 6 yards, but instead he decides to throw back across his body to Aaron Jones, and it's too high, goes off Jones's hands, it's almost intercepted. And these are the things that McCarthy, I think, is feeling out of. When can I make this play? Is there room to make this decision? But I think McCarthy said it well when we spoke to him that yes, you want to try things, but it's not a try things camp. Like, it is a results camp at some point. And it's not just, well, hey, it's new, he's learning. Like, there is a corner that you have to turn that he hasn't gotten there yet. I think if there's one thing that would be a concern, it's that he's never faced NFL pressure before. And so he's getting the first look at true first-team NFL pressure, which I think that they practiced against the first team last year, but this is you as QB1 seeing what it's really, really like in those situations as the first-team quarterback. But going into week one, that's something that he truly has not ever stood behind and seen. So that adjustment, and then I think on a down-to-down basis with the accuracy, sometimes it looks great. And especially when it comes to play actions, especially when it comes to crossing routes. There was another one he threw today to, I think, Jalen Naylor, that was just on the money, like exactly how you would draw it up. Drops back, sets the foot, fires it 15, 20 yards down the field. Every single day he's had those throws. So this is why we don't want to be too far down on anything that he's done, but also point out that there are a lot of other throws that are not the wheelhouse for him that I think that he's struggled accuracy-wise, whether it was throwing the ball too high, missing Josh Oliver high, which is virtually impossible, and then, some like today where things are sped up a little bit and it's just not the same as running a 7-on-7 drill. The way I look at it is I think B is totally a fine grade. It's all part of the process, and we're going to know if it still looks like this in a week and a half. Then you might say, all right, where are we at here, or when's that corner going to be turned? But over the next week of, padded practices, a preseason game, we'll see if he gets into that. That's where I expect to really feel more confident in where he stands, not right now.
Yeah, and I think it should be noted that, Brian Flores, you want to talk about JJ McCarthy sitting here in practice saying, sometimes we just try things. I think Brian Flores is out here just trying things sometimes. It's not, and for those listening at home or watching at home, we'll just give you kind of a dive into what it's like during a practice. It's not KOC sitting there saying, this is the work I need to get done, Brian Flores, you better give us this look. It's kind of like a mano-y-mano, my offense versus your defense at times. So I think the defense was trying things today. There was probably things that they did during practice today that McCarthy has never seen in his life in football. You just have to look at some of these pressures that they bring, or how the front can look so different pre-snap and post-snap. And I do think that goes back to your point of, it does get in your head sometimes, oh man, is there pressure here? Am I going to have time to do this? But again, that is something, are we going to see growth? Okay, maybe today was the first time he's seen some of these exotic looks, these weird stunts after the ball is snapped. Is there going to be a marked difference between this time next week when he is seeing those things again. These are things that we will learn about JJ McCarthy. Can he learn things on the fly? Can he pick up things after a mistake and rinse it and move forward? It's something I thought Sam Darnold was really good at last year. Oh man, I screwed up that play. I threw that interception. I took a sack here. Flip the switch, clap his hands really loud, and he was ready to go the next time he stepped onto the field. We'll see. Does McCarthy have that in him? I think so. I think his makeup, and I always go back to what he told us on draft night. I've edited my life to be a quarterback in the NFL. I think his makeup allows him to do that. But I am curious how he looks coming out of an off day tomorrow when they come back to practice on Friday, when they are, full go over the weekend. Is his confidence a little shaken, or does he come back and say, no, I'm QB1? I'm curious to see.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to see that a little bit today, more from him than I did, because I thought after such a bad practice the other day, then you come back with the padded practice. It was one of the most aggressive, if not the most physical. Looking at you, Jeff Okudah, who it seems to run into too many people every day. I think that maybe some receivers are getting a little tired of Jeff Okudah. We'll talk about him in just a minute as part of the development. But I think it's just fair to kind of live in the middle with the evaluation of JJ McCarthy so far, because there's been so many throws that I've liked and so many throws that have looked like they are locked in. It's something he's very comfortable with, especially crossing routes. There's been a couple where he has put more touch on the football, but accuracy and the ability to go up against this number one defense and have these big plays and violence in front of you and all that, it does take experience and it does take throws. And with Sam Darnold, he had been in the NFL for a long time, and even if it hadn't gone great for him, he had still been in the NFL for a very long time, where JJ McCarthy has not. So I think you could still have the bar be very high, but also evaluate a little bit on a curve early. And to me, there is going to be a date where that ends, and that is probably after the first preseason game, where we're much more of the mode of these need to be good results. But even someone like Sam Howell, when he first started out in practice, it was a nightmare the first couple of days, and then he's looked much more like a regular routine backup quarterback over the last couple of practices. This is a hard offense, and that was another thing McCarthy talked about with us, is that the pre-snap stuff, the motions, all the reads that you have to go through, it's a lot. And my expectation was that they were not going to pare things down for JJ McCarthy, and it doesn't look to me at all like they have pared anything down for JJ McCarthy. They want him to run the complete offense, and that's going to have some growing pains along the way. Now, let me flip to the backfield, because I think a big conversation this offseason was, can you create a counter punch when the defense is winning against the passing game? And the answer in the playoffs, of course, was absolutely not. I think one of the winners of early camp, the biggest development, is that Jordan Mason looks like a freaking beast. And he is gigantic, and he is fast, and he finds holes. And their running game, as bad as their passing game has been against the first-team defense, their running game has actually kind of dominated the first-team defense. I think it helps that Will Fries has come back, but Jordan Mason just looks like he's going to be a really difficult player to take down.
Yeah, there was actually a perfect example of that in the 2-minute drill. It was either 1 or 2 reps right after the rep you described, where JJ McCarthy's rolling to his right, he throws back across his body, luckily wasn't intercepted, and they get to keep moving forward with the 2-minute drill. But with this, against this ultra aggressive defensive front, KOC, I think there was 39 seconds left on the clock in this 2-minute drill situational period. They were down by 1. They had a timeout. He ran the ball. He handed the ball to Jordan Mason. Jordan Mason made them pay for blitzing on the outside, and he got outside, and he got outside quick. And this guy is listed at 225. I think he might be 240. Still pretty quick, gets downhill, and when he gets to top speed, I think he looks just, you don't really look at him as a plotter, a guy who weighs that much. You just look at, wow, that guy looks pretty fast. And I think that was on display in the 2-minute drill. Overall, though, this guy looks like the exact type of person you would want to pair with Aaron Jones. Younger, bigger, gives you a different look. And then, oh, by the way, Aaron Jones set a career high last year in touches and looked pretty dynamic doing it outside of a little bit of bumps and bruises here and there. So I think the running game as a whole is going to be improved this season. because of Jordan Mason, but also because of those guys up front. You added beef in the middle. You added Ryan Kelly, who, no disrespect to Garrett Bradbury, but he is just a behemoth compared to Garrett Bradbury. You added Will Fries, who might be the largest offensive lineman I've ever seen the Vikings have in my time covering the team. And yeah, that includes Christian Darrisaw. Like, Will Fries just looks like he was built different. Donovan Jackson in the middle. There was a concerted effort to improve not just the interior of the offensive line so it could hold up in passing situations, so they could exert their dominance in certain parts of the game. And I think we're seeing little parts of that right now. It's hard to judge too much in training camp because nobody is going 100%. They're going like 95% because nobody's trying to run someone over if you're on offense. And unless you're Levi Drake Rodriguez or Jeff Okudah, you're not trying to tackle anybody on defense. So I think right now you are getting little bits and pieces of what this running game could look like. But yeah, Jordan Mason, to me, early winner of camp in terms of just how good he looks.
So before we move on to a couple other things, Purple Insider has a new sponsorship with FanDuel, new partnership, I should call it, with FanDuel. And so every day we're going to have a FanDuel question of the day for every episode. And today is based on JJ McCarthy's over-under from FanDuel, which is 3,650.5 yards. Would you go on the FanDuel over-under for our question of the day? Over or under, based on what we've seen from the very good running game and the ups and downs of McCarthy, more than 3,650 yards?
I think I'd probably go over, but not like definitively like, yeah, go to Vegas right now and hammer the over. I think that's obviously a pretty good line. They set them with intention. They don't want you to just win. But I think I would go over because, one, I know Kevin O'Connell. I know at his core he wants to throw the ball, and he wants to throw the ball downfield. He wants to generate explosives. And even if he talks about play style and improving the running game and building through the trenches and getting Aaron Jones and Jordan Mason the ball more, at his core, he wants to push the ball downfield. So I think JJ McCarthy, assuming he stays healthy, will clear that number. I think a big reason I think he will clear that number is because of some of these snapshot moments in practice that we've already talked about. The 20-yard dig route over the middle. That's something Justin Jefferson lives in the middle of the field, catching 20-yard dig routes. And that might be the best throw that JJ McCarthy makes right now in his career. Get to the top of my drop, see the vacancy downfield, let it rip. He's going to do that a lot this season. Whether he can mix in those layered balls and be effective in the red zone will probably dictate how good the Vikings as a whole can be, but he's going to throw for a lot of yards. So I think I would go over, but I also acknowledge the fact that he's young. There are going to be growing pains this year. He's probably not just going to be Patrick Mahomes in year 2 with the Chiefs where they run all the way to the AFC Championship game. I think there's going to be ups and downs for JJ McCarthy this year, so I'm not super confident, but I would take the over at the end of the day.
It's a little over 200 yards per game, which I think that they will get to. The one thing that came to mind for me looking at this number on FanDuel, our new partner, is that there could be games that are just low scoring. Mm-hmm. There could be games where they are playing so well on defense that O'Connell does want to rein it in a little bit. And I also think we saw this even from Jaden Daniels and Bo Nix, who had great seasons last year as young quarterbacks, that there are games where it just kind of goes sideways. I mean, there are games where you're just not going to have it. And we're seeing this in practice from McCarthy, where some games or some practices, he looks like he is rock solid. He looks like he's in complete command. And then others, it looks like the accuracy is a little bit off. Even Kirk Cousins and Sam Darnold had their ups and downs. I think it's a little more extreme for a starting quarterback. I would have it slightly over right now, but I do think that if they run the ball this successfully, then even Kevin O'Connell will be okay with running. I think that, and this is just funny how information changes ever so slightly, and then I start to doubt myself, because I think 2 or 3 days ago I would have said, yeah, over. Like, what are we talking about here? They're throwing for 4,000 yards. But now, like, well, as well as Jordan Mason's running, and as well as this offensive line is doing against the run, but not as much against the pass, and back and forth like that, I think, as you said, it's a very good line. So in the comments, what do you think? Over under for our FanDuel question of the day, 3,650.5 yards. Now, just interesting player developments. I think number one for probably the entire team is Dallas Turner. That he had another good practice today, and I want to say that that's 4 really good practices in a row. His teammates are starting to take notice. His coaches are starting to take notice. Got a shout out from KOC the other day, and then came back the next day, played really well. And Matt Daniels said that, and this is such a classic football thing, but hey, there's a reason why it's a cliche. He said that he would show up here in the offseason at 6:30 in the morning, and Dallas Turner would already be in the training room forming somewhat of a day-to-day type of workout plan. And I think that we're starting to put together the pieces a little bit on what happened last year with his transition into the NFL, that he needed to learn how to be a pro. And again, sort of cliche land, but all of it is true. And I think what you've seen is someone who took the offseason very seriously, got with the right people, including trainers, which you wrote about, but also Jonathan Grenard, who is just a flat-out superstar, and he is seeing the results so far. I think he has been one of the best players in all of training camp.
Yeah, I think so. I think I would go as far as saying, to me, has been the most impressive player, because there have been ups and downs for certain players. It's been pretty much just ups for Dallas Turner, in my estimation. So you look at him, and I think the biggest thing with him is that he looks bigger. He looks stronger. And that was apparent the first day we were out here. We saw him stretching in the indoor facility. But what are you going to do with that? What are you going to do with the mass that you've put on your body? A lot of guys can just go out and lift and get stronger in the off season. So it was going to be big to me how he was going to look. And through the first week of training camp, he looks the part of a first-round pick. He looks the part of a guy who a lot of people consider the best defensive player in the draft in 2024. Huge development for the Vikings. It allows them to do so much more, too, if you have another guy like that alongside Jonathan Grenard and Andrew Van Ginkel. If you truly have 3 starters, like Brian Flores has said a couple of times with regard to Dallas Turner, it takes your defense and it increases the ceiling. I think another thing Matt Daniels was talking about today was raising the floor, and when you raise the floor, you also raise the ceiling. It's just like it goes up. I think Dallas Turner's ascension raises their floor as a defense, and it makes their ceiling limitless to me. He can do so much on the field. You look at him because he was a high-drafted edge rusher and say he probably just rushes the passer. But he's talked about this. He dropped into coverage in college. He's comfortable doing that. He's always been one of the best athletes on the respective football team he's been on. So, yeah, has he won off the edge throughout his football life? Yes, but he's also shown capable of dropping into coverage, and you're seeing that right now in training camp. There are plays where he's with the ones and he's coming off the edge and Andrew Van Ginkel is off ball. There are also plays where Jonathan Grenard and Andrew Van Ginkel are coming off the edge and Dallas Turner is off the ball. I think what it also breaks down to is when you're trying to get your best 11 on the field, Dallas Turner is absolutely a part of that bunch. I think we talked about this a week ago at the start of training camp. What does this mean with Josh Metellus? Is he going to play more deep safety? Or, like the 3 safety thing was because Harrison Smith and Cam Bynum were really good and Josh Metellus had to find a way onto the field. Well, now, yeah, I would hope that Dallas Turner is better than Theo Jackson when I'm just trying to find my best 11. So, yeah, does that mean Josh Metellus might have to play a little more deep safety? Sure, but I think it's because you want to find a way to get Dallas Turner on the field. He has earned, I think, that trust and that level of let's see what we really have in this guy. And I think it's really impressive because you see sometimes with rookies, they don't have a good rookie year, or with young players, they don't have a good rookie year, and it just goes down the tubes. We saw it here. Lewis Seen, he got hurt, but it just didn't happen for him after that. There was no growth. There was no pushback. I think with Turner, he probably felt like he deserved more as a rookie. He went out and did something about it this offseason, and we're already seeing kind of the reaping of those rewards.
Yeah, Brian Flores now has good problems to have, which is that he's got too many good players to get on the field, but they won't all stay healthy all at once. And this also gives you an opportunity to rotate Andrew Van Ginkel out of the game for a series, or Jonathan Grenard out of the game for a series, or move Van Ginkel back to a linebacker spot for a play depending on your matchup. And I think it's a real Flores thing that he will play different players, different snap counts based on not just what he thinks of them, but also how they match up specifically against another team. So it still might not be, it still might not be like a typical, like he takes this many snaps every single game because that's how they do it. It might be a little bit mix and match or up and down for snap counts, but I think as far as having another dynamic player, and I know we're only 7 days in and we're a long way away from him actually crushing people in real games, but this is everything to this point that you could have wanted to see from him, and it is a difference maker. I also would throw out that Theo Jackson has been really good so far in camp again for the second straight camp. Last year he was fantastic, kind of earned himself a contract without even being on the field all that much. But another interception in today's practice. The guy has a nose for the ball, but is also one of the smartest, one of the most prepared players. He's shined on special teams. He's beloved within the locker room. Harrison Smith even sort of joked of like, how did Tennessee let this guy go to us? That's how much they respect him. But it is a development that Theo is not the guy who seems to be starting next to Harrison Smith, because you need to have Josh Metellus on the field. So the coaches have still insisted that Metellus is going to play a super hybrid, like in the box, D-line, nickel corner role like he did last year. I don't think that that's going to happen at the same rate that it did. I think he's going to play much more traditional safety, which in some ways is a tad concerning because I don't think he has the same type of maybe instincts for the football that Cam Bynum had. I think he's more of a short area quickness and toughness type of player than a long speed guy. But at the same time, the football IQ is through the roof with Josh Metellus, and you want him on the field. But how often they use that 3 safety package will be interesting to find out, because Theo has had a great start, and here's Metellus doing something differently, and maybe this will result in Harrison Smith maybe taking on some different responsibilities that he wouldn't have before. But that is certainly something that has stood out to me, is that the hybrid player looks like it's more Dallas Turner than, or maybe even Van Ginkel becomes some of that, and they split those types of roles, and Metellus is more of a safety who comes down into the box.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely like what we've been able to glean through the first week of training camp, is that we looked at Josh Metellus as the Swiss Army knife that could do everything, and that was his superpower. And it is. Like, his versatility is his superpower. But I think we also maybe collectively lost sight of the fact that he had to be that, because there were 2 safeties ahead of him, and if he wanted to play, he had to be this Swiss Army knife. Well, maybe that can be someone else now. And it does look, at least early in camp, very early, it's not even August yet, it does look like in order to get Dallas Turner on the field, he almost had to go into this offseason knowing I have to be able to do a little bit of everything. He's showing early on that he can do a little bit of everything. And he's been dominant. At times, he's just blowing plays up. If he was allowed to take quarterbacks to the ground, I don't know if Sam Howell would still be standing, because Dallas Turner has lived in the backfield. I can't stress that enough.
So here's one thing I think is very difficult to evaluate as of this moment, which is the cornerback group, because they haven't had to do a whole lot with the defensive line dominating. Quarterbacks are constantly under pressure over these first few padded practices. And so, I'm sure you wonder, how good is Jeff Okudah doing? How good is Isaiah Rodgers doing? And we get to see them in one-on-ones, and that's really interesting, where Jeff Okudah is very, very physical in those one-on-ones. And I think that some of the Vikings receivers are like, hey, stop, let's cool it down a little bit. I'm on your team. He has been that physical on a few plays. I mean, he completely took Jordan Addison out on one with that long reach and that power that we've seen. Now, how does that fit into the complete defense? That we don't know yet. Mekhi Blackmon did mix in on some first-team reps toward the end of practice. I don't think that is decided. I think the only thing that's decided for the cornerback group is just that Isaiah Rodgers and Byron Murphy Jr., who's looked fantastic, by the way, coming off of the new contract, he's making plays left and right. But I think Rodgers and Murphy are clearly the starters. I still think there's a battle there, but the overall depth with Blackmon, Okudah, has looked to me like he's played pretty well. And then Zamiah Vaughn emerging and Dwight McGlothern getting interceptions 3 days in a row. I think now, suddenly, something that we were asking a ton of questions about in the offseason, are they going to get Jair Alexander? Are they going to get Jalen Ramsey? Suddenly we're saying, that group looks fine. That looks like a solid starting secondary. In fact, probably an upgrade from where they were last year.
Yeah, and I think that's why you let the string play out sometimes. I think there is a rush across the NFL at times to say, like, we got to go buy the shiny new toy, when you might have people in your room ready to take the next step in their career. You might not. Maybe if in another reality, maybe we're sitting here on day 7 of training camp saying, oh my God, they got to go sign somebody. But we're not, because they let themselves see what they had first before being reactionary and going out and signing an old guy who might be past it. So I've liked what I've seen. I'm not ready to crown Jeff Okudah as like the comeback player of the year, because I do think, and bear with me here, when we talk in training camp about the defense is ahead of the offense, it's because oftentimes the defense just gets to be extremely aggressive, and it's hard as an offense to dial back to the right degree where you're able to get work done and not just put guys into the ground. Jeff Okudah has been aggressive. At times, maybe overly aggressive. More aggressive than I think people are expecting him to be. And while that's a good thing at baseline, it does allow you to look better. And it does allow you to look dominant at times when it might not actually look like that during a real NFL football game on Sunday. So I'm not trying to pour water on the Jeff Okudah inferno that has seemed to materialize on Vikings Twitter. I think there is a world where he could figure it out, and a former number 3 overall pick could get with a guy like Brian Flores, and it could just click. I'm just pumping the brakes a little because I'm not ready to say he is going to be day 1 starter. There's other things that need to play out. But overall, if I'm sitting here talking about Jeff Okudah with Mekhi Blackmon in mind, with Dwight McGlothern, like you said, 3 straight days with an interception, that goes back to last year. He just always seemed to be around the ball in camp, and even, at times during practices through the season when he would just be around. You'd hear guys talk about Dwight McGlothern always making plays. And then you have a guy like Zamiah Vaughn. The depth is there. You're right. Like, the depth is something that I think was a concern heading into training camp. And while I don't think this is all of a sudden the strength of the team, I'm not overly concerned about their ability to just kind of make it work. Now, if one of the big guys gets hurt, if Byron Murphy Jr. or Isaiah Rodgers gets hurt, that might be a different story. But right now, I'm okay with where they're at.
Special teams. You got anything to say about special teams?
Yeah. I mean, one, Will Reichert, it hasn't looked as flawless as last training camp, but I don't care.
It's been fine.
The guy's good. He's a
His
good kicker.
His only misses have been like from 50 in the wind.
It's been swirling, but I know people are freaking out because you write that, he missed 2 kicks. He's fine.
Can I tell you something?
Go ahead.
I have been essentially entirely off social media since I started training camp. Like, I barely even look at it. I just set some alerts for like Schefter, Pelissero, just to see, big news coming out. It's been a lot better.
Bliss.
Life has been a lot better. Like, I didn't know that people were freaking out because Will Reichert only went 10 for 13. So that's why it's actually, I would highly suggest it actually. Instead, just stick to YouTube and this channel and the podcast download, because there's no reason to be worried about a guy missing. He was crushing the ball. He doinked one in crazy winds out here, which, Matt Daniels said that they're working on, but I think Will Reichert has looked totally fine. I think if we're going to talk about one thing in the special teams, it is the returning and whether they have actual returners. And Matt Daniels campaigning at the podium for Isaiah Rodgers to kick return. I got to say, I like you, Matt Daniels. No. I don't want Isaiah Rodgers, a starting outside corner, to be returning kicks. But he did mention a potential option if they were, let's say they're down 7 with a minute and a half left to go, throw out Isaiah Rodgers, see if he can house one.
Sure.
Okay. I'll settle for that, but I don't want to see Isaiah Rodgers. What I'd like to see is Ty Chandler and Ty Felton and Rondale Moore for the returners.
I'm with you there. I think there are some sleeper names. Matt Daniels talked a lot about Miles Price, so someone to keep an eye on in the preseason.
You say the price is right?
The price does appear to be right for Matt Daniels. That's a guy to keep an eye on. Silas Bolden is another trendy. People liked him as a UDFA. But for me, if your returners week 1 against Chicago at Soldier Field, where they've been doing the split return as a kickoff with the new rule, Ty Chandler and Ty Felton back there, and Rondale Moore returning punts, that's totally fine with me. I think the new kickoff rule will create, hopefully, I think the NFL hopes, more returns. So you need a guy back there that you feel comfortable with the ball in their hands. And as a punt returner, Brandon Powell always caught it, but he never gained yards. I think if you could get a little bit of an element of fear in the opposing team with whoever's back there. Rondale Moore hasn't done it in 3 years, and he's coming off a gruesome knee injury, but he's someone who could be that in theory. So right now, yeah, I'm fine with the returners you have. I don't think they need to go out and sign Cordero Patterson, who just got cut. I don't think they need to do anything rash. I think what you need is probably in the building. The only other special teams thing I would note is that it does seem like there might be a real punting competition. We've heard this in the past, and they've cut the punter the next day. So I think it was Seth Vernon last year, so deep cut for those people. Matt Daniels said, yeah, Ryan Wright's going to have to prove it, and then they cut Seth Vernon because someone got hurt. But they don't have to cut Oscar Chapman, an Aussie punter, because he is the International Player Program. He's a free roster spot. It might let you kind of play out that string at punter. But I think they're challenging Ryan Wright. He hasn't been that good since he was a rookie. He holds the ball well, but if your best thing is that you hold well for your good kicker, then that's not good enough for me. So keep an eye on the Aussie, but truthfully, Ryan Wright will probably be your punter week 1.
All right, last question is don't forget the FanDuel question of the day in the comments, 3,650 yards over or under for JJ McCarthy. But how would you grade the vibes? Give me a grade of the overall vibe of training camp through 7 days.
A. I think because I gave JJ McCarthy a B, my mind instantly went to an A for the vibes, because even when he's been bad at times through training camp, you see him, he's dapping up people, he's doing the part that you would want out of a starting quarterback, picking guys up who might be hanging their heads. The vibes of the offense, even when they've looked like a slog at times, haven't been downtrodden, hanging my shoulders, and I think it's because you have a pretty magnetic leader in JJ McCarthy. I also think the vibes are an A because your defense looks pretty damn good. I think the offense, when you zoom out and you can get them away from how tough it looked at times against that really good defense, I think the offense is going to be fine. Maybe I'd go A- because Justin Jefferson got hurt. But even that, he's fine. He looks fine. He's hopping around out there. He's dancing. He looked really mad today, only because when Dwight McGlothern intercepted the ball, he ran around the entire field like a lunatic, and then he handed the ball to Justin Jefferson. I think Justin Jefferson's going to remember that one if we see him back on the field at training camp at any point. But A- if you want to go there because of the injury, but I'll keep it at A because it doesn't sound like it was anything serious with Justin either. He's out there with his teammates. He's running around. He's throwing the ball. He looks like he wants to be out there right now. He looks like he wants to be out there yesterday. They're going to be safe with him. But I think overall, the training camp vibes, which makes sense with the way that Kevin O'Connell runs practices. No fights. If you go hard one day, you get a nice little light day the next day. They went hard today, and for about 2.5 hours, they're going to get a day off tomorrow. There is intentionality with how he runs his training camps. He doesn't want his guys spent before week 1. So, A for me.
I'll go B+.
Okay.
I'll say that these last couple days of practice where McCarthy has not gotten throws off and has struggled with his accuracy have maybe just had a ever so slight eyebrow raise of, well, I guess this is where he's going to have to go with his improvement. How fast can you get there? I mean, we are 6 weeks away from football here, and there is a lot of improvement in the actual throwing consistent accuracy, where even his best practice, where he was so great, we all wrote about it, talked about it, there were still a couple of balls that were not on point. And I know, Kirk Cousins never had some perfect, glorious practices where he hit every single throw, but we're talking about kind of misses that are you should be able to hit a guy in stride running open, or you should be able to hit, Josh Oliver in the back of the end zone, which we've mentioned a few times, or maybe better decisions. And so I think that maybe these last 2 days have poured a little bit of cold water on the, wow, this looks really, really good. And, oh yeah, it's a training camp. It's a young quarterback, and there's going to have to be development there, so we will see where it takes us from there. Dane Mizutani, Pioneer Press. Matthew Coller, as always, we will be back Friday on the practice field, so we will see you all then. Football.